Hello, friends. Welcome back to John's Comics with Kids. This is another one of the Saturday night movie streams I do very often on my channel. I've had the blessing to have a lot of great guests join me over the years to talk about all different kinds of movies in all different kinds of ways. And I will legitimately say that the sort of seed for this all kind of started with one individual who was always in the chat, always offering insight, always sharing and just really great knowledge about the cinema. So this is exciting because this is the first time I've had this individual on to join me. So, ladies and gentlemen, I got the Gore Vidal himself.
Hello, everyone. Hi, John. Thanks for having me tonight.
It's a pleasure, and I kind of feel like, and maybe you're in the same boat on this. I feel like I've been not wanting to rush this conversation with you. I haven't wanted to dive into this too quickly because I know you and I have, at least if nothing else, a similar pool of interest in cinema that has, cultured us to the extent that, there's so many avenues where this could go that I really wanted it to be the right venue.
Yeah, no, I agree, John. I mean, I think I've known you for a few years now, and we've been on the streams together, and but never really discussed movies or something or topic or subject that we both are, I think we could say, pretty close to. I think these are stories that we're about to discuss that are, I think, affected us to something. I mean, let me phrase that: affected us, and had an impact on us. And I'm looking forward to this. And I've always liked how you discuss not just books but comics and movies, and that with everyone that you have. And I think that's part of the reason so many people just come to you and listen to JP to giving you a hard time.
Well, I mean, he wouldn't be my friend if he didn't, right?
That's right. No, JP's right. Yes, absolutely. JP seems like a really good friend. Absolutely.
He truly is, and we're at some point we're gonna meet up. It's gonna happen here soon.
You haven't met yet.
No, never met. Yeah,
Surprising. Okay.
yeah,
That is surprising.
yeah. Let's say hello to some friends in the chat. We have Las Cruces, who is New Mexico native. He is almost always a tough one to beat in the chat, and so
He's everywhere.
he was tailgating like 7 hours ago. He was tailgating here, and Robert Galvin, I'm going to tell you right now, he was, the second he found out you were going to be on the show, he was texting me. He was like, "You're going to have Gore on. Oh my gosh. Tell me what time, tell me when, text me the thumbnail." he was very psyched.
Good to see you.
Great person. We got Gordon in the chat. What's going on, Gordon? He's commenting that Alec, our dungeon master, is going to really push us in D&D tomorrow night. I won't be there on my nephew's birthday party, so the rest of the team will have to keep my character alive, hopefully. JP says, Gore's going to bring the quality of discussion on John's channel up to a new level, which always appreciated.
Hey, JP.
John's, I've never invited you. No, it's not. And you're not selling it. You're not selling it, JP.
I had such a good time with JP on Deadly Class. I really enjoyed it. Thanks again, JP.
Yeah, that was a great discussion. And as I was reading the hardcovers, I was going back and rewatching the videos with you guys to kind of. I did the same thing with East of West by Hickman when you guys were when he was doing that series. I was going back and I was like 6 months behind his shows, whatever, watching the rewind.
No, thank you. I'm glad whoever's here. Thank you for being here. Hope you enjoy it.
Vic is also another great chat member who's always here. When we
Jay Hood and Vic and Alan on their show. I enjoy them.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Vic.
And we got Stu. What is going on? Stu, huge Ethan Hawke fan. So can't wait for this. That's fantastic to hear because I've been really a huge fan lately of I don't know what I did to my algorithm, but I've been getting these little interview clips with him where he's dropping insight on whether it's poetry or art or cinema, what have you. He's a really incredibly well-spoken individual. Let's see. Never heard of the Before trilogy. How have I missed it? Well, don't worry. We will give you some insight on it, some thoughts on it. And I've included in the description down below a comprehensive list of the work of director Richard Linklater, which will obviously be a huge part of this conversation in general. Started, from his early indie days, with movies like Slacker, all the way through to his more pop, stuff like School of Rock and what have you. So there's a whole list down there. If you're unfamiliar while we're chatting, you can, open the description underneath and get some information on that filmmaker who is a big piece of this process. Let's see. We got Brother John. He says, "What's good? Stopping by to say hi. Big Linklater fan. Love the Before trilogy, and of course, yeah, Boyhood. A big hit from Linklater as well. Great one.
Evening.
Two of my favorites were on.
Hey, Chris.
Oh, we're here now.
I haven't seen Chris in a while. He hasn't made a video in a long time. Hope you're well, Chris. You and your family. Best.
Yeah, he's been kind of quiet. He's been in the chats, but he's been quiet.
Yeah. One day I would like to do a conversation with Chris. Chris.
Anything in particular?
Well, he is the Eastern European stuff. I mean, not just because of his personal connection to Eastern Europe, his Poland and such, but just maybe Eastern European writers or just comics in general.
Mm-hmm.
And like yourself, I think Chris is interesting.
He is one of the best read members in our community. He reads so much and just voracious. He's just absolutely voracious.
I like his opinions and I like his range, and I know I've commented this in the past with. There's a circle of YouTubers, for example, that I with you all, but there's another circle which is doesn't really converge with with our group here. And Chris is like the bridge between. I'll see him and that group, and then I'll see him over here, and I think that's pretty good. Damien's another one. Sleepy Reader's another one, and that's that.
He's very diverse. Yeah,
they
sure.
are in the range of YouTubers, and I think that's pretty nice.
Yeah. What's up, Perry? How you doing, Perry? Hey, so the films we're talking about tonight, we loosely consider the Before trilogy, and the three titles are down below here. They are three films written and directed by Richard Linklater and others, and we'll get into the others in a second.
I see some of them here. Okay.
And the order they go in is Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and then Before Midnight. They were shot and released and take place exactly 9 years between each one of the films. So it's sort of like you get to watch the actors and characters and filmmaker grow and the filmmaking evolve across these three films. So they're very unusual in that way. The same way Boyhood being shot the way it was sort of defines that film. So I guess what I want to talk first, I guess, is kind of the Linklater aesthetic, I guess, is kind of where I want to start with this, because I rewatched Slacker recently, and I had not seen it since college. Like, it had been a long while. And I see definitely some tendrils of what he was doing in that sort of episodic walk through, I think it's Austin, right? Downtown Austin.
Yes, it is.
And there's definitely some of the roots of that here, where he has those longer takes, and there's this beautiful humanity and philosophy happening on every corner, and these, it's all super conversational, this long dialogue sequence stuff. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, what you see as that Linklater aesthetic across these three films, because it definitely evolves, but it's totally in keeping with what I think we see from his work.
I think in the early movies like Slacker, Dazed, and up until the Sunrise film, he's really good at capturing moments in time. I mean, I think he's been criticized or praised for your stories really don't have a plot. Or they'll say something absurd. I think it's absurd when people say this. Nothing much happens in your films. And I think when people say that, I'm thinking, well, what do you want? A fight? A car crash? An extended sex scene? What do you want? And I'm thinking quite a bit happens in those moments in time. And I think, like you alluded to there with Slacker, which was shot in Austin. And then maybe we can later on discuss regarding the history of that film, because it's actually rather important for the history of movie making from that period, and how important Austin was at the time, because I was living there at the time.
Oh, okay.
And but certainly what he does here, he allows people to talk in a way that it's unusual, and certainly I think for people who are more familiar with him now, I mean, he's considered a mainstream film director. But the thing is, he didn't start out that way, and I don't think I'm pretty sure he does not consider himself a mainstream director, and certainly his aesthetic is not. It's very much similar to a European flavor of storytelling. and movies that quite well, like Conversation with Andre and stuff like that, where people are just talking.
Yeah.
And then someone say, again, Conversation with Andre, they rarely ever leave the dinner table. Like say maybe at the end when they leave, right?
Right.
And they because if nothing much happens, well then you're not paying attention to the movie. Yeah.
Well, I remember one of those clips I saw, I think it was Ethan talking, was something along the lines of him saying, look, I've never fought in a war. I've never, been held at gunpoint. I've never, had to, climb Mount Everest, but
Yes.
my life nonetheless has felt dramatic and has had drama. And you can't negate that by claiming that nothing happens in these movies, because they are clearly important to the characters who are having those moments. And I think that's the beauty of what's being captured here. And it, in that way, obviously Linklater being a part of that indie film festival group, you can throw Soderbergh, you can throw Kevin Smith in this group. And what I always felt like Kevin Smith was the pop art and Linklater was the abstract expressionist version of the same aesthetic, which was people having these long-winded conversations and hinting at and tinkering around big ideas, but whether it was reverting to infantile comedy in a Kevin Smith film, or whether it was bordering on almost like abstract expressionistic kind of conversation, both of them were trying to tap into the same thing, which was the truth of conversation.
Did you see this film? You said you saw it at university, right?
Slacker?
Yes. Did you see it? Was it part of a course, or you saw it on your own, John?
It was part of a course, and we weren't in a theater setting, sadly. So we were seeing it in a classroom setting, and it was up on like a projector screen board, but it was not in like a theater.
Okay, I'm just curious then. So it already was part of your curriculum. It was already part of film studies.
So I was lucky enough to have, I had a great professor in one of the years I was in college, and he was very interested in abstract filmmaking. He even showed us Le Jet,
Chris Barker film.
Which,
and I thought about this film with the Sunset Trilogy. Anyway, continue.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did.
So Le Jet, for those that don't know, is basically the basis for 12 Monkeys later on, but it's all done with still photographs. It's all stills. And then this incredible sound work. The sound work almost was the movie, like a radio play or something. It was beautifully done. But this professor was always trying to push us into abstract, into thinking beyond pop, which has its place, but wanted us to think deeper about what we were doing. And I was very interested in Linklater, Soderbergh, Kevin Smith, Quentin, and these writers who wrote dialogue really, really, really well. And so Slacker was part of that group where he was showing us what indie films can do, and the ways in which we don't necessarily need to follow this, real rigid and sometimes unnecessary structure that Hollywood has so often relied on.
What he did, I think, if you want, I don't know how much you want me to discuss this, John, regarding Slacker and how I think Linklater sees things and how maybe that affected the making of.
I think it's perfect for a diving into the aesthetic of these films, because I do think it's very in keeping with what makes them work so well.
Okay. I think, let's go back to Austin. I think we have to put Austin, Texas in perspective here, and how important that city was in the 80s to many of us, including myself, when I lived there in the mid to late 80s, when I moved there. You think of Paris, you think of Rome, you think of New York City, Los Angeles, London, Mexico City, places that, where people go that are cultural, places that people just go to, right?
Sure.
Now, Austin is not at that level. However, in Texas, we have Houston, 6-7 million people at the time. Dallas around the same. Dallas-Fort Worth area, major cities of international they're international cities. Austin was not an international city back then. It was basically what you see in Slacker, right? And regarding Linklater, he was not from there. He was from an area in Houston.
Okay.
And he came from a middle-class family. He was a mainstream guy. He liked baseball. And he liked to read books. Movies were not something that I think he wanted to do early on in his life. He wasn't something that clicked with him. I mean, he played with the idea of camera and stuff like that, but he liked books and he liked movies. And he went to school, not at UT, but I forget, I think it was Sam Houston University or one of the universities here in Texas, and he went to. In any event, he ended up doing off jobs here and there, including working in an oil rig at one point. And then he moved to Austin in the early 80s. And what you see there in Slacker is pretty much Austin. But what you don't see there is two things. You don't see the Texas legislature. The Texas legislature is about 10 blocks away from Austin.
From that little bit that they were
That's
filming.
right. And the state capitol is huge. I mean, it's one of the biggest state capitals, I think, in the country, if not the biggest, which is interesting because our legislature meets only once every 2 years for 6 months. That's why we get very little done here in Texas. And so you can basically walk from the Capitol down to the university. And the university, here's the other second part, is the University of Texas, UT. Hook'em Horns, the Longhorns.
Yeah.
And here in Texas, the universities that are the prominent ones are University of Texas at Austin, College Station in Waco, and Rice University in Houston. These are and maybe North Texas. That's where Larry McMurtry came from. And so what happens here is a lot of young people, if they can't leave the state, to go to New York City, to go to Los Angeles, to leave, right?
Right.
And but when you go to Austin at the time, Austin, Texas at the time was about 500,000 people. Now it's like 1 million. Now it's an international city. It's almost unrecognizable of what it was when I lived there. And what it is you would attract all these people there, all these young people. The University of Texas has 50,000 students.
Oof.
And it's all congested into a small little area.
Sure.
They're all just crammed in there. They have a major law school. Now they have the LBJ Center, named after President Johnson, which is a think tank sort of thing.
Okay.
And what you saw in Slacker in the background, which is not shown, were all the sorority and fraternity houses.
Gotcha.
They've been around since the Civil War.
Because the film has that like college town vibe where you've got, late night musician acts happening in bars, and you've got people living in cramped apartments and sharing them, and you've got lots of traffic and people having conversations about all sorts of things, and a very young sort of demographic and mentality across it.
That's the thing about Austin, in a sense, back then, is you had those characters you saw in Slacker. Many of them were paranoid, conspiratorial. They have all these ideas of philosophy. What he did was he captured people that we knew that were just all over the city. But what he didn't capture, and that's just fine, but just to give you an idea of how that city clicked for Linklater, in my opinion.
Sure.
Is you had these, some of the exclusive elite sororities and fraternities. Matthew McConaughey belonged to one of those. And we'll get to him in a moment because he's part of the circle. Because he was at UT at the time. And when people go to these fraternities, when you apply for a job or you go to graduate school or something, it's there in your resume. I mean, that's the way it works. You belong to this fraternity? You belong. That's just the way it works.
You're in the group. Yeah,
you're in the group. It's absolutely. And so you have this environment there. But then you have the University of Texas itself, which has always been Jorge Luis Borges, the great Argentine writer, taught there like for a year in the 60s. University of Texas, the Harry Random Center, has some of the manuscripts of James Joyce's Ulysses, Garcia Marquez's original manuscripts.
Wow.
They have a huge, up until I think the 90s, maybe they still do, when it comes to Latin American studies, that was the place to go.
Wow.
They had this tradition of strong education, liberal arts. Now, the legislature was always conservative. Yes, Texas was a Democratic state, but yeah, basically it was conservative and very right wing. But the liberalism was in Austin. The liberalism was in pockets in Houston, pockets, a little bit of Dallas, right? And maybe
Okay.
in South Texas. So to be someone in the 80s to go there, you're in Austin, University of Texas, when Linklater moved there, and he was interested in movies, you had arts theaters. You had the Dolby Mall, which is right next to the university. And
Okay.
Dolby Mall was a mall that had, it was a dormitory for the UT students, but it also was a mall. But it had a movie theater that showed art films. And this is, again, it's one of the dichotomies of Austin. And then down the street, you had the Varsity Theater. The Varsity Theater just showed art films, but it was huge.
Nice.
So you had this dichotomy of conservatism,
Sure.
liberalism, radicalism, all within down the street. And you had all these eclectic bookstores and coffee shops before Starbucks, before anything like that. And you would be at a coffee shop where the waiter or the waitress, they stank a little bit. The women didn't shave their armpits. I'm not joking.
This gives me Berkeley vibes.
You know, yeah, I think so. And then and then it'd say, and let's say I said something like, well, you know, in physics, the blah, 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 blah. The waiter will correct me. Why? Because the waiter's a graduate student at UT.
Right.
That's just it. You had these people.
So the level of education
was extremely high.
Yeah.
Among these people. And also was the introduction to the avant-garde. So you had people like Linklater and so many, and Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson was there when Slacker was shot. Wes Anderson was down the street watching the film getting shot. Wes Anderson's roommate was Owen Wilson. Matthew McConaughey was a film student considering law school. This is all between 89, 90, and 91. Now, all these names we all know here, they were all there in this little area. And they all came, I mean, Matthew McConaughey came from Uvalde, then Longview. Wes Anderson came from Houston, but he came from an upper-class family. He went to St. John's. St. John's is a prep school in River Oaks in Houston. That's where Ted Cruz, we have two senators here.
Okay.
Cruz, his daughters go there. And from there, they go to the major university. It's an exclusive area in Houston. But if you see Terms of Endearment with Jack Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine, they shot where Jack Nicholson lives, that's River Oaks.
Oh, wow.
That's right. And so you had these people here, you know, and I'm sorry, going on about this, John, but I'm trying to put this in context here for Linklater, is that when he got there, he wasn't a film student, but he was hanging around all the film students.
Sure.
You know, and suddenly he said, I want to make a movie. So he started to make these short films in the 80s. In 85, he was one of the co-founders of what they call the Austin Film Society.
Okay.
Which is now huge. It's now part of the South by Southwest.
Yeah.
And South by Southwest started in the late 80s. I went to the first show back then and saw 10,000 Maniacs and who knows what I saw. And so what it was is you people all these young people coming from these small conservative communities where you didn't see Bergman.
Right.
You didn't see Godard. You didn't see Kurosawa. You didn't see Rome. You didn't see Fellini.
Right.
Now you're in Austin and these theaters and it's all there.
Right.
And so for Linklater, Wes Anderson, Evan McConaughey, and these others, and Richard Rodriguez, when he's from San Antonio, Robert Rodriguez, he's from San Antonio, and he lived in Austin.
Yeah.
Same generation, same group. They're all born in the late 60s, early 70s. Same
and they all had films. They were getting into film festivals in that late 80s, early 90s, that whole boom.
And that's when he finally made Slacker. And I mentioned Dolby Mall. No one would play this film. He had it made. No one in the country would play it. He just happened to know the guy who ran Dolby Mall, the guy who, and he goes, I'll play it on one day and we'll see how it works. He played it for one day, but it sold out. And suddenly, and everyone in Austin, it quickly, because I didn't see the film initially because I'm thinking, I live in Austin. I see these people. I don't
Why do I
want to
want to
see
see
this
more of
film.
it?
No, but everybody's, and I was had friends that were the same way. And
But it's
so I
that
didn't
same
see it.
mentality that I think the naysayers of the before trilogy would have, which is like, these are just normal conversations I could have anywhere. I want to see
Yeah.
something that's extraordinary,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. And so for me, when we saw that clip of the pap smear of Madonna, I mean, we knew people like that. I'm thinking, why am I going to pay money to see this film? And but the thing is, so it premiered and suddenly became a hit
Yeah,
there in Austin, but it was the only place it was playing, nowhere
that's
else.
funny.
It was insane. To give you an idea about how important Dolby Mall was, is it was one of the few places that showed this film.
Wow. In the whole state or just in general?
In this whole state, because what happened, this got an NC-17 rating.
Yep.
It's one of the first films. So in Austin, it was the only place that they played The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and the Lover. And eventually later on after this, when other NC-17 films, some of the other theaters would play that, but many of them were just
Right.
terrified. But it's one of the few that played it. But this was a mindset of Austin at the time. Yes, we had the music scene. Austin always had the music scene. You had Gus Van Sant, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all this rock and roll.
Sure.
That was just part of it, right? Country, rock and roll, and punk. Definitely punk music. But then you had this dichotomy of the fraternities, the sororities, and a very conservative legislature.
Yeah.
Right. And this fluctuation. But the thing is, it inspired in a way people like him and Wes Anderson. Because the thing is, about Slacker. Slacker premieres. Wes Anderson goes to see it. Inspires him to become a filmmaker.
Oh, so you get Bottle Rocket. Yeah.
Bingo. Kevin Smith sees this film when he's up in New Jersey.
Yep.
He says, "You can make movies like this?"
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you get Clerks.
Exactly.
That's just it. So he made this little movie, and then it got picked up by a distributor, and it got picked up by some of the film journals. And the next thing you know, Linklater is considered this independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
And then later on, he wants to make a film about high school, and we get Dazed and Confused.
Dazed and Confused, yeah.
And then we get the trilogy film. I'm sorry, I went on way too long. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I love it. I think putting sometimes these films in a historical perspective allows for a better understanding of the aesthetic and the function that it serves in that story. I mean, I think a lot of times people who watch Citizen Kane now don't have the same understanding for it without having the context for certain elements that make the film groundbreaking or creative or original, because it's now many of those tricks are ubiquitous now. You see that photography style or the unreliable narrator or the split narrative. You see all of these things, the anti-hero character, so many things that at the time were revolutionary, but you wouldn't understand without that historic context element. Chaos is mentioning that I posted on my Instagram a scene from each of these three movies to kind of like highlight a little bit of the dialogue and the way it works. And if you're unfamiliar, it's a great way to kind of get a glimpse. It only lets me post a minute at a time, so I did a minute from each. I'm awake. I'm wide awake. I've been waiting for this conversation. Late night, but it's later for him than it is for me. Let's see. Rick commented on Instagram to me that he was excited for this conversation. He says, love the disposition and love for Linklater, truly in tune with humanity. A self-taught writer-director. Absolutely.
He was self-taught. That's true. That's true.
So, as far as these three films go, you've talked a little bit about setting for Austin and how that made it work for Slacker. I think it's just as interesting for these three films because we get three cities that star just as much as these actors, right? We get Vienna in the original film. We're getting Paris in the second film. And then it's where are we in Greece in the third film?
Peloponnnesia, the Peloponnesian Islands, I think.
So in that way, the culture and the citizenry of those locations shine in a really fascinating way. For me, I feel more in these movies that I've been to these cities because I've actually never been to any of these three cities. I've been to other cities in Austria and other cities in France, and I've never been to Greece. But like, there's something to be said about the way we are sort of plunked down in these cities, moved around and sat in specific places. And then the beauty, I love the final sequence every time when they show you those locations without anybody there. Now they're empty spaces. For me, that's the biggest aesthetic piece for this, is that the setting stars, right?
Mm-hmm. Don't forget that, John. Where did you see this? Did you see it in the theater when it came out, or did you see it later?
I saw the second and third ones in the theater. I can't remember where I saw it. See, Sunrise was 95, I think. So I was still in high school. I must have seen it on VHS, I think, the first time. I must have borrowed it and rented it. And like, ooh, Ethan Hawke's in this. I got to see this. And then had my mind blown, because I was still
no
in high
idea
school.
What it was about, John? Did you know what it was
No,
about?
I had no idea. It looked like a raw, it's sold, I think there's an interesting concept that the independent, structure and style of this is wrapped in a Hollywood rom-com aesthetic, like or not aesthetic, like a wrapper, like it's up around the outside of this piece. It's presented like a traditional Hollywood romantic comedy, of which it is, of course, not. But the packaging could imply that, the poster could imply that, but that's just the lure, right? To get you to realize that there's something a lot more here when you actually enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. The Linklater said that he wasn't sure where he was going to set the movie. He said at one point he thought of San Antonio here in Texas.
Oh, really?
And, he really thought. He didn't have a particular idea for the setting. I think the only reason he set it in Vienna was because he had been, after Slacker, he had traveled over there.
Okay.
And for the film festivals. And at one point he wanted maybe Berlin. But the Germans were not very nice, he said. And so he did not like them. And so, but in Austria, they were very receptive to him.
I found I've been to Salzburg in Austria, and it reminded me a lot of this film, as far as just the culture, the people, the beer gardens, the cafes, the beautiful rivers and scenic spots. There's, for me, like, I felt like I was living it when I finally went in the 2000s. But I just rewatched Sunrise yesterday with Charlie for the first time. She's already like asking to watch the sequel. She's like, "What happened? Did they meet?" She liked it a lot. Yeah,
your kids are way too smart. You're way too mature. I complimented before how not just intellectually, but also just mature your kids are. But then it has to do with what you and your wife have done with them. So
for Charlie in particular, likes stuff that is not. I mean, she can appreciate Fast and the Furious. Like, she can appreciate the what its purpose is. But she prefers something that's got character, right? And this has that in abundance. For me, though, like, going to Salzburg reminded me of this movie, because I just felt like it had all the same interactions for me, the city speaking to me the same way it sort of speaks to them, whether it's the moment with the two gentlemen on the bridge where they're talking about their play, where they're like, "Oh, I play the cow, it's about the cow," and then at the end of the movie when they're like, "Oh, we didn't go to the play, like we did," because of course, much like Waiting for Godot, he's not going to show up. Like, anything that happens at the beginning can't happen at the end. That's not the point, right? The journey is what we're here to see, not the end result. And that's the beauty of it. And much like we don't get the resolution of will they meet again in 6 months, like, that's not important. Each of these movies could stand alone as their own story.
Yes.
But when, because you don't need the beginning and the end, you get the journey in the middle, that piece of time spent together, which they comment a lot about time and death and and the philosophy of how little they have to enjoy, and trying to get as much out of the time together, specifically in this film, that first one. I don't know where I was going with any of that, but for me, it's just the beauty of the structure of these, which is not designed like a traditional Hollywood narrative, but more focused on just the casual conversation elements, much like Slacker, though, the same way.
It's just much like Slacker. I think in Slacker, for those who are familiar with Slacker, there's a bunch of characters, and they're just having some of them are maddening discussions. And
And then they bleed one to the next. Like one ends,
yeah,
and then you just pan over. There's another couple there, and we're gonna move on and with them
move
to see what's
on.
going on with their story.
And but here you have just Celine, played by Julie Delpy, right?
Mhm.
And Jesse, played by Ethan Hawke, and he's from Texas. And I always think he's from Houston. I don't know why I think he's from Houston. I think I'm thinking of Reality Bites, which was set in Houston, a movie he
Mhm,
made
mhm.
right before he made this film. And so he is coming from Madrid because I think he had just him and his girlfriend had broken up.
He had spent, but he had gone. They were actually coming from Turkey because
That's right.
her grandmother. She had been visiting her grandmother, and he had been bumming around Europe on a train because he didn't want to go home and face the breakup that he had just gone through with his girlfriend. So he just rode the train and was a ghost for several weeks, just landing
I
wherever
thought
he
he was
landed.
right.
And
And yeah,
then
and Julie's coming back, or well, Julie Delpy, but Celine's coming back from Budapest, going to Paris, right?
yes,
And
the train is on its way to Paris, but stops in
right,
Vienna.
Indiana, and they're both reading a book. He's reading a memoir of that madman Klaus Kinski, and which is an absolute nut.
And I don't remember what she's reading. Do you
Now
remember?
she is interesting because when I saw the film, I saw when it came out in '95. Um, she was reading George Bataille. George Bataille was a footnote in a course that I took at university. He should have been a footnote because he was a major French philosopher and essayist in the mid 20th century, very radical, who wrote these transgressive novels and essays about eroticism and death. One of the early books that I read by him when I was 18, 19 was Literature and Evil. His connection that all literature is by its nature evil because it unfolds something uncomfortable in anything. It's supposed to make it doesn't have a happy ending, a resolution. And she's reading a series of erotic novellas. One of them is about a mother and who is a hedonist and wants her son to become a hedonist to the point of making love to her. It was made into a really good film with, actually, I had it here. I do, with Isabel Hubert. Isabel Hubert, I mean, she does.
She's amazing. Very
She will do
talented.
anything. Yeah, this is a really good film. So anyway, she's reading a George Bataille novel, and
That's funny.
which is they're transgressive novels, which are quite shocking. But I like Bataille, and so anyway, so they're reading these books, and then this German couple, right,
Yes.
is having this argument.
Is arguing, yeah, which forces her to move seats and sit by him.
All these chance events happen
Yeah.
for them to meet, and then I guess if free will comes in, I mean everything from are we going to talk to each other, what are we going to
Right.
say, and everything, and so when we get to the third film, right,
Yeah.
we see that couple up, the German couple. It's almost like we see this couple here, but that's what
Yeah.
ahead. And so yeah,
But
and then
they all kind of crisscross ultimately the three films in a beautiful way.
so they basically they start having a conversation on the train, and they get along, but he has to get off, or she has to get off. Who has to get off first?
He's catching a flight. It's evening in Vienna, and he's catching a flight at 9 o'clock in the morning the next day to go home back to America. And he ultimately says, like, I need more time with this woman. So he talks to her, and he has this great pitch, right, where he basically says, look, jump to the future and look back at this moment when you're thinking and you're in this marriage and it's not really working out, and you're thinking back to all the boys you could have hooked up with or done something with. I could be one of those guys. And this is a great opportunity for you because you can come with me and experience it right now. And then later in life, like, you can look back and say, no, he was just the same as all those other guys. Like, my marriage is fine the way it is. This is going to be a great thing for you in the future. If you just jump off the train here, catch tomorrow's train to Paris, and walk Vienna with me all night. I can't afford a hotel room. Like, let's just spend the night walking Vienna all night. And she jumps off she goes with him.
Yeah, because those two, first of all, he had to take the initiative to do that. And then she had to take the initiative, do I go with this man?
Right.
And
they'd only really had like 1.5 conversations at this point, like a little bit at their seats talking about the German couple. And then they went to the meal car and had a little, like, cafe kind of meal together, and and enjoyed it enough that he felt the need when the train stopped to like make his pitch.
And it worked. And then basically they got off together, and now they started talking. But I mean, just to make people who were watching, is there was never going to be a trilogy or even a second film.
No,
this was just a one-shot film.
Exactly.
And it takes us what, 7 hours?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the entire, it's daylight at the beginning and the end, and then it's night all in between, and it's summer, so it's probably a shorter night, than others.
And what I liked about this is, I want to get you personal here, but well, she's a French woman,
yes,
and he's an American, and I think he's from Texas. And my experience with here in Texas with European women was very similar to his. The way she was reacting to everything, typical American. When I watched it, I would just smile. And even though she was from France, women I knew from Eastern Europe or from Germany, and it was just like that. And it was just like that. And the way he would react to her, and it seemed like she was at this point kind of a romantic, and he was kind of a cynic.
Yeah,
about I'll be questioning this about relationships and about love and about all these things, but he wouldn't stop talking, which is always a sign that he likes it.
Well, right? And she says several times that he has this adolescent charm, that she feels like she is more mature than him, and gets this kind of like, oh, he's just this little boy chasing after something he doesn't know what it is yet.
Yeah,
and she later in the film says, I was going to sleep with you when you got me off the train, but then of course she also finishes that sentence by saying, but now that I know you, I don't know that I want to. For her, she's gone, her journey was sort of the opposite, right? He was already looking to get her in the sack, and she spends the night talking to him, and then realizes this is more than that. It's a great and backwards sort of flip.
I think maybe in a way he was not the typical American for her. Because the way it's set up, I mean, it would have been a typical American discussing. First, he read books. What my experience with European women is whenever they meet some of the American men, they don't read a lot of books. The ones I happen to have met are pretty literary, the women, and they really respect literature, right? And I'll just say this. I remember when I was living in Austin, a woman from Europe that I met, and we went out. And we came back to my place, and she walks into my apartment, and I have a huge library of books, right? It was books, and the comics. I was out of comics at the time. I'm not joking. No American woman has ever said this to me. He says, "Do you have all these books to seduce women?" I said, I smiled, but she was serious, John. American women that I would know who would come and they would say, why do you have all these books? Have you read these books? I go, I read some of them. So why don't you read them? Why do you still have them? Why do you still have these books? You already read them. You already know how it ends.
Right.
Now, nothing happened that night.
Such a great dichotomy there.
That's just it. So the thing is, what Linklater did here, I mean, because he had said it could have been a European man, a European woman. He had no idea. But these two clicked, right? They clicked, and boom, off we go to the races. And so I like this dichotomy of these two, a European, because basically she's from France, but she's European, the European mindset, right? And although he is from Texas, you can never really tell he's from Texas. He basically encompassed some of the best things of what it means to be an American, the way I see it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so, and even though he's got some of the things, the little quirks of what Americans would have, but then she's got some of the quirks of what the Europeans would have. But they hit it off. And I think he was probably impressed with her. She was impressed with him. And so they have this conversation that goes on and on and on. All through the night. Yeah. All through the night. And then they have that wonderful kiss. Yeah. But if you remember, but even then, she had said she was enchanted with him. Yeah. When he, again, the way he described his grandmother. Yes. The water hose, remember? Yeah, when they're on the train still in the food car, he tells a story of playing with the hose and the water, and he thought he saw his grandmother who had passed away inside of the water, and it clicks with her, who had just seen her grandmother
and also is very spiritual, believes in ghosts, even though he doesn't. The funny thing is his cynicism. He doesn't believe it, but he has this memory that so clearly proves
But it's
otherwise.
very romantic and it's imaginative. And
Yeah.
that all has to
And
do
she
with
brings it up
God.
later. And actually, my favorite scene, she brings it up, which is when they're at a cafe in a nice part of Venice or Vienna, sorry, and they play a game. She pretends to call her best
Yes, I
friend in
recall.
Paris.
Yes.
So she pretends and she makes
Doing
him be
this.
her best friend. And she picks up and she starts speaking in French. And she's like, "Da-da-da-da-da-da," and he says, you know, I've been practicing my English. Why don't we do this in English? And it's so cute. The way they listen and respond to each other. And then she tells her friend, who is Ethan, pretending to be her, oh, I met this guy on a train and he told this story. And I think when I got off the train, I was already like, I was hoping he was going to ask me to get off the train. Like I was hoping. Then they flip and she's like, okay, now you call me, you call your friend to tell him what happened. And he calls it up and she does this amazing, like American man voice. And she does this impression of like, yo, hey, how's it going, man? Oh, no way. And then but the beauty of it is, they're able to say things to each other they would never normally have a chance to say. You know, he's able to express to her the impact of that train discussion, and she's able to express to him what it is about him that got her interested in getting off the train in the first place. Mm-hmm. And it's, for me, it's the core of that first movie. It is you see them being honest with each other, not about just life and philosophy, about love and about relationships and sex, but it's like, why you, right? Well, why this person?
Yeah. That image there, I mean, it could have gone the wrong way. I mean, she could have interpreted it in a way, well, that's weird. And I don't want to be hard on my fellow American women, you know, but some of them would have said, what?
That's a little
it makes
creepy.
No sense to me, right? You know, but to be fair, a French woman might think the same thing. But again, she's reading George Bataille. I mean, George Bataille again. I mean, I don't know what that was just. I mean, I don't know why she was reading that book.
Or which story she was in the middle of.
Who knows, right? Who knows what was going on there? You know, just by chance it happened to be there. And but the way they click together is quite remarkable. And it seems so natural with them. And to think that in that small moment in time, it's so compressed, and he's really completely enchanted by her. He is, and then remember when they go into the record booth, John?
Yes.
And they listen to this wonderful song by, I forget the singer, and they're listening to the lyrics, which are about love. And what I liked about it, they did this throughout the films, all three of them.
Yes, I was going to say they have musical moments in all three movies where they're listening. Yes. There's no dialogue, and it's a rare moment in these movies, and just forced to interact. But you know, in the first one, it's awkward. They don't really want to make eye contact, so they're kind of, you know, taking turns looking at one another. The second one, it's like they can't take their eyes off of each other. They're just glued. And the third one is, it's somewhere in between. It's this, I don't know if I feel like looking at this person right now. It's a rainbow of experience with these musical scenes.
There's a wonderful, what's the line? Because when in the second film, when they're going up the stairs, but no, let's just stick with the first one. When they're listening to the record, right?
Yeah.
And he's looking,
and this tight little booth, record booth.
He's looking up here. He'll look at her. She'll look away.
Yeah.
They'll turn away, and she looks at him. And there's a line that I think she says about how she liked.
It's when they're doing the fake phone call.
Yes.
She says to her fake friend, that's really him, I like the feel of his eyes on me when I'm not looking at him.
And I'm not looking. Beautiful.
It's an amazing line. Amazing.
That could be a line to a novel.
And she's looking down when she says it.
Yeah.
And he's looking right at her.
We're on the same page, John.
Absolutely. So good. I'm so glad you thought of that scene, that line. It's so good. Yes, we are, Gordon, we're film nerds. This is what happens when we get together.
You're excited. What does it say? You're excited?
You're too excited.
It's very moving. And the thing is, like you said, John, it's like a 4-minute scene. The camera's just there.
Yeah.
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 And I don't know how he got through this with the editing and the producers of the film
Yeah.
saying, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
And
And I don't know how they found the perfect song. Like, I'm sure they must have gone through a million songs to find the song for that record booth scene.
it works wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful well.
I mean, I don't want to keep you too late, so I'm going to jump to the next film, but we can go back if you feel the
No,
need
I'm
to
good,
make a
John. I mean,
connection.
I'm good. I mean, as long as you're good, I'm good.
Oh,
I'm awake. I mean,
you need to.
I'd
I
say
think
so.
we're setting the ground here, the groundwork.
Yeah, we're
So
good,
the
John.
film,
Thank you, though. I'm good.
the, the film has other great moments, of course, where they steal bottles of wine and glasses and make love in the park, and then get to the train station where she's leaving first, and they've decided that they're not going to write or talk to each other again. This is the one night, and this is going to be it. Then they both admit they don't want it to be one night, and he proposes the concept of 6 months from now, let's come back here. It'll be middle of winter, but who cares? We'll go wherever we want to go. I will be here in 6 months if you'll be here in 6 months, to this day at this time. She agrees. She gets on the train. He gets on the plane, and the movie ends. And we don't know. We don't know if 6 months later they make it back. We don't know, because that's not important. And I loved that ending when I saw this film, and it was a wonderful surprise when I clicked, I don't know, wherever it was, to see this trailer in 2000, whatever it was. 9 years later would have been what, 2003.
2003, I think it was.
That there was a sequel, and we were going to get the answer.
I couldn't believe it.
I couldn't believe it either. And what's even more beautiful about it, for those that don't know, the two sequels are credited as being written by Ethan, Julie Delpy, and Richard Linklater, meaning they basically, as a trio, crafted these films themselves and these characters and their evolutions. And it's a very unusual style. And it obviously had huge successful results, because not only were the films incredibly rewarding to experience, but they also got Oscar nominations both for the second and third films for the
I didn't
screenwriting.
know that. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
both scripts were nominated for Best Original Screenplay.
Huh.
So the sequel starts off with Ethan's character in Paris on a book tour. He's written a novel all about this experience in Vienna. Clearly,
This time, isn't it? I think it's called This Time.
yes. Clearly trying to hopefully find Celine, because they did not meet up again 6 months later. And he's married and has kids and is on a book tour, and he's in Paris. And who comes into the event at this little bookstore in Paris but Celine? He has a plane that he's supposed to get on at dusk when the sun sets. So there's a little time between the end of his book signing at this bookstore and his plane taking off. So the movie is almost in real time versus the first film, which took place over the whole night. It's almost in real time with them walking around Paris, using up the minutes and soaking up the time together before he has to get on his plane and go home. I will admit, this is my favorite of the three. I don't know if I can easily separate them, but maybe it's just because this is the most straightforward, joyful of the three. I know that it has its roller coaster of emotions, but for me, it has this sense of we found each other again. Like this exuberance that I don't know how else to capture. So what were your thoughts when you saw that trailer or went to go see this film? Because I was there opening weekend when this came out.
I saw it in the theater too, but not an opening weekend. And but it was around the same time. It was one week that it opened.
Okay.
I was surprised that this was happening, and I was actually stunned, actually. And I went to the theater, and like you, I mean, probably like you, when I saw the first one, that ending, where it's just, who knows if they'll ever see each other or not, right? We don't know, right? I have a film up here called Little Romance, which is the first film that Lane did. And it's about when she is in Paris as a 12-year-old, and she's from Houston. There's a Texas connection. She's from Houston, and Diane Lane's first film. And her dad works for AT&T, and she's going to a school there in Paris, and she meets a little boy a French boy. And Laurence Olivier helps them, these two kids to basically, they go to Venice.
Oh, I think I've heard of it. I don't know that I've seen this one, but I think I've heard of it.
They go to Venice and they run away basically because they're in love. And it has a fantastic ending. And I had seen that film because that ending to A Little Romance is very moving, John. Very, very moving. And the Before Sunrise film, it ends on a note where you're not really upset, you're not saddened, or you're not. It just leaves you okay. I mean, I think the last scene, Julie Delpy closes her eyes on the train.
Exactly, the last shot, she closes her eyes. Yeah,
maybe that's what reminded me of Les Jetés, which is there's a scene there has to do with eyes. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And those of you who haven't seen it, you have to watch Les Jetés by Chris Martin.
If you buy nice quality copies of 12 Monkeys, they'll often include on the discs.
Oh, good.
So like the Criterion I've got of 12 Monkeys includes that movie because it's not a terribly long movie.
It's 30 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's very short.
So I went to the theater, and Shakespeare and Company, actually I've ordered over the decades, I've ordered books and bought books, which are actually from that library, from that bookstore. It's a really, very famous library. Famous bookstore.
Okay.
And a fellow YouTuber named Celia, who lives in Norway, she knows me personally online. I met her on YouTube, and she's gone there. She's got an apartment in Paris, and so it's actually a famous bookstore. And if you buy a book there's an imprint that says Shakespeare and Company. And I have I have a Milan Kundera book, I think Immortality, in there.
Okay, so this is the bookstore that he's in at the beginning of Sunset.
And signing, and so he's doing the signing
because he says he slept upstairs and the cats were bothering him all night in this bookstore.
And so they're asking him about, was this real? If this really happened? Did you ever see the woman again?
Yeah.
And I think what I found very moving to me, again, I'm thinking about here, A Little Romance, and about personal things.
Sure.
Right. And I think the next thing I know, he's talking, and the camera you just see Julie Delpy standing there.
Yeah.
Her hair's pulled back. And he sees her. And you're thinking, he hasn't seen her who knows how long. And there she is. That moment, and the camera just pans to her.
Yeah.
Then back to him. You can tell he's a little bit rattled, and he's trying to be composed and end the whole book signing thing. And then they meet again.
Yeah.
And then when you think about it, they only had spoken 7 hours?
Yeah. 9 years ago.
9 years ago.
Yeah.
It left an impact on him. He's written this novel.
Yeah.
Where apparently she, or fictional character of hers, and now here she is.
Yeah.
And suddenly, from the viewer's point of view, they mean a lot to each other. You can just imagine what they've been going through, and you want these questions.
Yeah.
So they didn't see each other. Why?
Yeah.
And now here they are.
And they do and I say they, I mean, obviously the two performers and Linklater who crafted this piece do a wonderful job of giving us breadcrumbs across this film. And that's partly another thing I like about it is they don't give away the ghost. At the very beginning, they both admit, oh, I wasn't able to get there. And then later it sort of was revealed kind of the impact of the fact that he went and she was unable, and what that did to him and the spiral maybe he went on in his life. And they both repeatedly reference how those 7 hours were better than most of their relationships in their lives. And then she even says something. The scene that I clipped is the taxi scene at the end when they're riding back, where she basically,
it's a very moving scene.
She has this amazing speech about true love and how evil it is, and the fact that she put all of her romanticism into that one night and feels that she had none left for any of the relationships that she had that followed. And so the impact of that night clearly weighing on them even 9 years later to a magnificent degree.
Like she says, I was doing fine until I read your book.
Yes. Yeah. And it stirred up.
It messed me up. It messed her
Yeah.
up. And
She
now
claims not to have read it at one point, and then later admits to, obviously, that it's impact on her life.
impact on her life, and then she had been talking about all the men she's been with. Um, they break up with her, or she breaks up with them, and end up getting married.
Yeah.
And not that she would have married him, she says, but
Yes.
they never asked me to marry.
She said, I would have loved if they'd asked. I would have said no, but
No, I would have said no. And now here he is,
yeah.
married.
And he's basically seemingly like another one of those in a sequence, right?
That's right. And he's got a kid.
Yep.
He's a successful book writer.
Yeah.
And she's pissed. She wants to get off the cab. She goes, get off the driver.
Yeah, pull over, let me out.
Pull over, let the cab at the driver. Pull over, let me off. Give me out. I can't be near you. I can't be near you.
It's my favorite scene because it's so full. They've talked around the topic. Much like the first film, they talk around the fact that they both want sex, right? They talk around sex.
That's right. I like that.
And the sequel talks around a relationship, right? It doesn't. They talk philosophy on life and marriage and philosophy on all these things, and avoid the big, elephant in the corner that's really at the root of this, which is in the same way that she felt like I knew I wanted to have sex with you when we got off the train. He knew he was going to get a divorce the second he saw her in that shop. He knows. And the last line is her saying, "You're gonna miss your train. You're gonna miss your plane.
That train. You're gonna miss the plane."
Yeah, it's such a great, because she's finally realizing what he knew, and the joy he's got all through this movie is that even when she's mad or he's upset with her, he knows this is gonna work. That his book has done what he wanted it to do, and that he's going to be calling his wife to get a divorce very soon.
So you go back to the cab scene, in the sense that where she thinks everything is good for him, and then he finally tells her that it's not.
No.
That his marriage is not it's not good. He loves his son.
Yeah.
But then he describes that scene. I have this dream about you where you're pregnant.
Yeah.
And I lay my arm across you and I kiss you on the ankle. And he's getting emotional and he's looking away, and she wants to reach over and comfort him, but then pulls away when he turns it back. And she realizes he's not happy.
Yeah. And earlier he had said something like, "I'm worried if you touch me, I'm going to dissolve into molecules." Like he's truly concerned, I think, in some part of him that maybe it wasn't real, that he was in a haze of grief and that he had experienced something that the other person clearly didn't.
But John, this is the essence of love.
Yes. Let's get into this.
This is the essence of love, the essence of the erotic, eroticism has mystery.
Sure.
Sex is separate. There's no mystery in sex. But the erotic are moments like that. And where,
because it's the psychological, it's the mental, it's the non-physical.
It's the psychological aspect of it.
Right.
And I think we sense that here.
Sure.
And I think it's the essence of love, of what it is. And when you know that it's true, and when you know, it's risky, it's dangerous, and
because there's vulnerability and
huge leap of faith. I have The Unbearable Lightness of Being up here.
I saw that.
Because in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, when you've read the novel or you've seen the film, but certainly the novel by Kundera is if you fall in love with somebody, there's a lot of weight with that, because you're going to have to call the consequence. Basically, if the love's going to last, at one point it will end either by death or something else. And it's going to have all this weight on you. Or do you want to live a life not falling in love, avoiding that, and that is lightness. Which
is where Celine has been kind of keeping herself in stasis. And they mentioned in the first film, the second they decide that it's just going to be one night, they're on the boat, in Vienna, and she says, I don't think I can, I don't want to do the thing where we give each other phone numbers and we're just it'll peter out. I want it to be one night. And he agrees, and it instantly puts a destructive layer onto the night for the both of them, because they both feel like now all I can think about is the end, right? Now that we've admitted that this means something and we're trying to care for it, we've admitted it's going to end.
It'll end. There's a line in Marcel Proust's, I don't know if you read Marcel Proust's Swan in Love.
No.
And the series of novels that Proust did called Memories of Things Past. But in the first novel, Swan in Love, there's a scene where it's pretty well known in the sense that, I mean, not well known, but anyway, Swan sees a woman in Odette who will become his wife. But as soon as he sees her, not only is he attracted for her, it's like he's in love with her, but he feels this deep sadness because he knows it will end. I remember before I read that novel, I had a good friend of mine, and I told her this. Again, go back to my Austin years, back when Linklater was making these films. And I told her this, and I remember she looked at me, "You're out of your mind. That makes no sense to me." And later on, when I read Proust, I go, "Well, Proust said this." I'm saying he's out of his mind too. So, but I think it's true. I mean, you fall in love with somebody in the sense, and it's such a beautiful, but it's a heavy experience. But for some of us, you may think, if I feel this great about this,
right,
how am I going to feel when it ends? And
yeah.
It will end. And then am I going to be able to deal with it?
Sure.
Am I be able to handle it?
And I think that's they're it's like they're on the edge of the diving board in this second film, and they're both looking at the choices that could happen here.
Yes.
And what happens in these 2 hours is clearly going to affect everything they do, no matter how it works out, right? Yeah. It's going to impact the rest of their lives the same way these 7 hours have impacted the intervening years.
Mm-hmm. And he's a married man.
Yes.
He's got a son, and he lives in the States, and she's in Paris.
Yep, with a boyfriend that she mentions it's not going very well either.
Yes. Oh, it gets even worse in the sense that when she says, "Yeah, I'll study at NYU." What?
Yeah.
When were you at NYU? 98 or whatever. I was living in New York.
Yeah.
You were living in New York at the same time? And then he adds, what was he going to the wedding? And he thinks he saw a woman that looked like her going into a bagel shop?
Yeah, they both sort of have this feeling that wherever they were in those in those 9 years, that they could have just been on a opposite side of the street at any moment and missed each other. Little did they know, of course, that there was a probability that it actually happened at one point when they were in Manhattan together.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the
sorry, go ahead.
No, so we know how basically it concludes at the end.
Yeah.
Is when they go back to her place, and he says, "Well, I want you to play me a song," because she says, "I play the guitar, I play music."
Yeah.
And actually, I have the soundtrack because I really like the music, so I bought the CD. And Julie does sing those. She has several songs on that album, and she doesn't want to play it. And it's that song, "The Waltz."
Yeah.
Da, da, the waltz.
Yeah.
And it's about basically, sad love song.
It's in my Instagram story for anyone that wants to see it. I used it as the song. I used the song of Julie singing it it's in my Instagram story for promoting the video for tonight. If you just want to hear a snippet of it.
And then, like you said, John, she plays a song, and then he puts in a CD.
Nina Simone. I love it.
And she starts to do a little dance.
Yep.
Because she had seen Nina Simone in concert twice or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there, and she says, "You're going to miss that plane." And then
he's just smiling the whole time.
And the camera, like in the first one, fades out to her.
Yeah.
And then I'm watching this in the theater thinking, Great. Now it's what? Now what? Now what's going to happen?
What's going to happen? Which again, it doesn't feel the need to tell you he's going to get a divorce, just like it didn't feel the need to tell you that they would not connect 6 months later. I think what I liked about it was in both cases, it gives you the sense that, look, we gave you these hour and a half, 2 hours with these characters,
Yes.
and we trust you to know them well enough to make assumptions on what will go next, because it doesn't matter. What we wanted to give you was this crucial moment in time that is important to them, much like the previous film did and the next film will do.
So, John, in this second film, how many hours did they spend together?
I think it's like 90 something minutes. It's hard to know because they, he says, I got a little time before my plane. Let's go get a coffee. And then the coffee turns into a walk. And then it turns into we're in a park, or then we're on a boat, and then we're in a taxi or no, we're in the driver that picked him up, and then we're in her apartment. But I think it's supposed to be almost real time.
So the 10 years that they've been, 9-10 years they've been separated, basically about 10 hours they've spent together. But those 10 hours seem to be more significant than all the years that they've spent, him with his wife.
Correct.
And her with the numerous partners.
Yeah.
That's the essence of what love is.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite beautiful how they did that.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Amazing. Incredible to capture something so profound and meaningful in the mundane, you could argue, in the norm of life. I'm gonna prep the third movie here for people, just so they know their framework, because I want to talk about the theme of love in a big way here. So the third film, again, 9 years later, and we've got them on a vacation as a family, a mixed family in Greece. He has a son from his first marriage. They have twin girls from their current marriage. They've been together in those intervening 9 years. They've been together. They've got these two amazing girls. And the big centerpiece of this one is the fallout, ultimately, from what his choice was at the end of Sunset. And
I like that, the fallout. I like that.
His son is flying back home after having spent the summer here in Greece. And the son is going to college. He's going to be in New York, and dad is feeling very strongly that he's missing, that he messed up as a dad early. He's learned lessons with his daughters, and he doesn't want to miss out anymore. And that if he doesn't make a connection with his son now, he's never going to have it. So a big core element of Before Midnight is him confessing to Celine that he would like to move their family to the States for a few years so that he can be part of his son's life. And of course, this is going to have huge impact on their kids and on Celine's career and her family and her life. And it creates a lot of upheaval in this day that they're spending together without the girls. They're staying with some friends, and they get a sort of date night, and they're going to go out on the town and have a nice dinner together and of course make love and all these things. But it all goes awry because they can't ignore the elephant in the room this time, which is he's kind of already made his choice. He's kind of already decided that this is important and he can't ignore it. But I want to talk across all three films. I want to hear your thoughts on the films and what they're trying to say about love, because for me, the beauty of the aesthetic of these films is that, you have a film that's very immature, you could say, about love, and very passionate and lustful, and they're both hinting and playing around sex. And then you get to these mature adults who sex is not even like important in this second film. It's definitely about the connection that they missed and the need they have together. And then you get to the third film, and it's about family. It's about creating an environment as a team, as a unit together. And I think it's a beautiful look at it, the evolution of love in human life. And I don't know, what were your takeaways for what these movies are trying to say about love?
This is much more of a challenge for me because No, because the thing is, you have this experience and I don't, John. I mean, you've been with your partner, your wife, and your children for a long time. And I think for someone like yourself, or anyone in your position, you've been from there from the beginning to where they are now.
I mean, yeah, I was,
Yeah.
I mean, in the first film came out, I was probably 4 years younger than Jesse all the way through. I'm about 4 years behind Jesse all the way.
And you've been, and for me, I mean, I'm not married and don't have any kids. But I can understand as best as I can understand what they're both going through.
Sure.
And certainly they both made a choice when they decided, well, they would say it wasn't a choice. They were both in love, right? It overcomes you, right? And he made a choice to be with Celine. But what this meant, he had to get a divorce. And as we learn in this one, there's a lot of acrimony
Sure.
between him and his ex-wife, who apparently has not forgiven for what happened. And even made the custody issues a challenge, difficult, because seems to be like she has full custody of the kid. He just sees Henry maybe some of the summer, 6 weeks or so,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Christmas, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is for them is that they made a choice to be together. Now, at one point, they lived in New York, but she became pregnant, and there was a complications. And she said they wanted to go back. She wanted to go back to Paris.
Yeah.
Because her mom was there, and she wanted her mom to be there. And they never went back. But the thing is about both of them is they're in love with each other. And if they had been single, let me rephrase that. If he didn't have a partner, if he didn't have a child, it would have been easier.
Sure.
But certainly when in love, when basically is when, like you said, the taxi cab drive, where he's trying to discourage her from this job. And she says, why are you trying to discourage me from this job? Is it because, like you said, you want to go back over there? But basically it goes to this. You resent this. You resent being with me. You blame me for this. And he goes, I'm not blaming you for anything. The son, though, his son calls her. Doesn't call him.
No.
And his son tells her, about the kiss with the girl.
Yeah.
And when the son tells him, "This is the best summer I've had," he goes, "Oh, father son," and she goes, "Well, she didn't tell you he kissed this girl."
So that's the scene I clipped and put on Instagram. Is the scene where they're driving and the girls, the twins are asleep in the back, and she says, "Yeah, it's I think it's in love. I think it was a nice little fling or whatever." And he makes the comment, "What if they're together for the rest of their lives?" Because he's now become the romantic in some way, and she laughs it off and says, "Oh, it's just
cynical. She's much more cynical here."
She's like, "Oh, it's just it's young love. It's the first love or whatever." And he's like, "So I met she's like, how many times were you in love before we met?" And he's like, "None. I remember my first love. It was you." And she says, "Oh, stop. You had sex. You were not a virgin." And he says, "I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about the first person I loved and felt a connection with." And then he's like, "What? Were you in love?" And then she says, "Yes, no, I've been in love lots of times before this." And he's stunned, and he plays it off and he lies. But he basically, he's like, "No, you were he's like, "I'm 41 years old and I've only been in love with you."
He's still in love with her. Yeah.
And she is heartbroken to realize that that's true. And he has to play it off as a joke, like he was pretending, but it's at the core of what happens all the way through the film, which is that he's trying to let her know that, like, I've put you first. Can you put me first for a little bit here?
First a little bit.
Find a way.
He's trying to make her understand the sense. Look, Celine, it's not that, how do I put this? It's like when her grandmother died.
Yeah.
Her grandmother dies. That's the reason she wasn't there. And he said in the second film, "I wish things had been different." She goes, "Well, my grandmother died." No, that's not what I mean. Things that are beyond our control.
Right.
we're in love with each other, but there's certain things beyond our control. You couldn't be there because of your grandmother. I had no idea. I had, who knows what I thought, but I had different ideas. And here, my son, try to understand here. My ex-wife is angry with me, making custody very difficult.
Yeah.
I would like to go to the States, but if you don't want to, we won't go. But this does not mean I resent being with you. This does not mean I'm not 100% into you,
Right.
like I was when I met you. But for her, it is.
It's personal. Yeah.
It's personal. And
Yeah.
she has, and that one, those, and also the way they argue. They do argue like people that I know that argue. Like couples
Absolutely. That the scene in the hotel
That's where you
room.
come in, John, because
Yeah.
no, what I mean by that, you've been in this, you have this experience that
Truly.
I don't have.
Yeah.
You've been in a loving relationship. You are in a relationship. You have children. And I think that what I saw up there is how real couples argue about these things.
Absolutely. They did a phenomenal job capturing it. I want to just say hi to some folks. I totally forgot to say hi to Carlito when he came in. And to Fire Guy Ryan said he's worried about the nudity. No, you're not. There's actually no real nudity in these films. There's a lot of...
The third one does have a few scenes.
Yeah. But most of it is pretty straightforward. G-Man gave me a huge super chat. Thank you, my friend. That is hugely kind of you, Robert. Let me play a little something for you, man. I haven't got to play one.
Let me run and get something, John.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to play a couple of things for Robert here.
Okay.
Let's see here. Let's do this one, Robert. And I'll do this one for you, buddy.
Mom called the doctor said, no more monkeys jumping on the bed.
Yeah, no more monkeys jumping on the bed, Robert. And I'll do one more. Huge thank you, Robert. Huge thank you for that. Absolutely. Very kind of you for that super chat, my friend. We were basically just getting to the point of that scene. And if you guys haven't seen the films, we're not really ruining anything, I hope, for you, but really just trying to highlight across these three films what these two actors and Linklater, the writer director, also like crafted as writer. They were writing the second and third films together, and then of course staging and planning a lot of this stuff together. But the scene that I wanted to get to was the one in the hotel room when it's supposed to be, hey, we got no kids around, we can fool around, let's, we got this hotel room for the night, it's going to be sexy time.
And then the phone rings.
And ultimately everything that's sort of been held at bay for the previous hour and a half
collapses.
Yeah, the house of cards comes down, and they, unlike the previous two films, they can't escape reality for moments of like walking across Vienna or casually strolling through Paris and escaping their lives, right? The previous two films were under a veneer. They were giving a chance to escape his breakup, her grandmother's passing, his marriage, her boyfriend issues. They were escaping all of these things together in a moment of conversation, and they can't do it anymore because reality is the veneer now. Like they have gone onto the other side where they can't escape it because it's who they are, and it is their life now, which I think is a very interesting flip. And I know a lot of people they feel like the third film doesn't necessarily have the exact same feel of the first two, and it's because of this issue. I think the first two films are an escape in a way, and the third film is settling in, right? It's coming into a place of honesty in a relationship that was built behind the veneer, but the veneer is gone now.
The first two films, you could say, are a preamble to the reality of love.
Absolutely.
And the first film, the way it ends, and the way the characters are remembering it for years is like the aftertaste of love,
Right.
and until they meet again, and they realize that they did. She still loves him, and he still loves her. And I think if you idealize love, this love will last forever. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean I will always desire you for the rest of my life the same way? Does that mean you will desire me the same way? If you go in that way, it's dangerous because you're going to be disillusioned. You can still idealize love, but you must understand that we're human beings and some things will change. But at the core, if we love each other, the seed will remain strong, like the core of an apple, for example. The beautiful apple will peel away, everything, the sweetness will go, but the seed will remain if it's true. And in these two characters, it's true. Remember the scene where they're having the dinner, the afternoon dinner with the writer Patrick and
And all
his
their friends,
partner
and
and their friends and such,
Yeah.
and they're all discussing all these things. And they have the young couple,
Yeah.
the young couple there who I think are one of them is the grandson of Patrick, the writer friend that he has, and his young girlfriend. In a way, it's almost like them 20
Yeah.
years earlier, right?
You can see 3 generations of lovers at the table, and all with different experiences and perspectives,
Yes.
but all trying through the language of his speech to encapsulate where they are at and their perspectives on it. But you also mentioned something I wanted to touch on too, but like I don't want to interrupt you too much.
You're good,
We
John.
discussed the idea of death and endings.
Mortality, yeah.
And love has that, right? To expect it to stay the same and look the same every day is flawed at its core. And to allow it to evolve and change and grow as you do, that's the function. That's the challenge. That's the real nitty gritty of it. For me, at least, that's the way I see it. But
Well, the thing is, this one's set in Greece.
Yeah.
And at one point, Julie Delpy, Celine's character, says, look at the ruins. But these are the ruins that have been around for thousands of years. But this is the birthplace of Homer, Odyssey, the Iliad, the first Western storyteller in human history that we know of, right?
right.
These are ruins, but they last. They may be ruins, but there's something deeper in them that resonate through human history in a positive way. And I think the setting here maybe is intentional. I mean, I don't know how this worked for them. But when they're having the conversation, right, the partner of Patrick, the older woman there who lost her husband, and she begins to have memories of him. I mean, of course, she tried to remember moments of him.
She has an amazing monologue here.
Monologue where she tries to have these moments of him to try to make him eternal.
Yeah.
Remembering his face, his eyes, his lips.
She even
And
says like something about I remember the feel of his hair, even though he was bald at the end of his life. Like I was trying to remember what that felt like.
Yeah.
When he had hair, when we were first together.
Yeah.
That's how far back she was trying to hold on to these things.
And she was starting to forget parts of it. And she goes, no, I must focus on this.
Yeah.
And it's true. There's a story by Italo Calvino, the Italian writer, where he wrote this little, I forget what story it is, but it's about what is eternity? And eternity be just that. Remembering, for example, of a woman that you love. Remembering how her skin, the silkiness of her skin, the feel of it, how your fingers touch on it. And if you just focus on that part of her arm,
right,
you could extend that for years.
Right.
This is before you get to the rest of her and the memory of her.
Yeah.
And so when she was saying that, it reminded me of that by Calvino.
Yeah.
But the way she said it is you accept mortality. And again, you're here in Greece among the ruins. And then you're seeing also the birth of a new love with this young couple there.
Right.
And you see it. And I think it was so wonderfully well done. And when Patrick says the success of his marriage before his wife passed away was he understood that there were two selves,
Hmm.
right? Remember that?
Yeah.
They were two separate beings. And I think that's what contributed basically to the success of them being in love until she just passed away.
Right.
But then accepted this love will end either through some interference of some kind or death,
Right.
right? And this is where they are. And there's this heated argument there in the place, and where she starts to complain about all these things about this hotel room. Who wants a massage? All these
Yeah.
petty things.
Yeah.
And she's really just angry at him. And she keeps leaving me, coming back. I'm leaving. She keeps coming back. She's coming back and forth.
It's her fear, right? She's coming from a place of fear that he's going to either completely resent her for their relationship or that this is the end. She's incredibly scared of where they are.
I have to admire regarding the way they did Ethan's character, in the sense of the proof that he really just loves her. When she leaves, he's not a violent man, right? And he doesn't say anything hurtful to her.
Mm-mm.
She's actually quite hurtful to him. And right before this all happened, before the phone call, when he starts to make love to her, this is one of the few nude scenes in the whole thing.
Yeah.
The way he's kissing her breasts, John. They've been together, what, 20 years?
I mean, it would have been just the 9. It would have been just 9 years.
9 years?
Because they were not together for the first 9, right? Just those 9 hours or whatever.
No, but what I mean is they've been together for how long have they been together, this relationship?
They will have been married for 9 years, give or take.
Then the way he makes love to her, the way he enjoys her body, is like a new lover. You see?
It's not. It has not changed for him.
Not at all.
Experience, even though they did make love 18 years ago for the one time.
That's what I meant. They've been basically. That's what
he's known her physically, right, for those 18 years.
18 years, and yet for her, physically he still desires her as he did 20 years earlier.
Right.
Because those scenes, the way they're very sensual scenes, but you see how much he really enjoys her.
Yeah.
And physically, but then the way he is with her, and he himself says, and I do believe. If you don't want to go, or if we do go in and come back, it's fine. But it has nothing to do with me not maybe resenting you or whatever.
Right.
But yet, it's not enough for her, though. But it goes back to the beginning of the film where, or the second film where she says, "You thought I was neurotic? You thought I was all these things?"
Yeah.
That was all these things, and all these issues. And so I had all these issues. And then she just walks out. And then she's there in the cafe. Well, it doesn't really a cafe, really. What is it, John? There's a water.
At the very end, they're sort of at the very end of the third film, he finds her on this. It's almost like a little jetty restaurant, right? It's like these little tables that are set up along the jetty where the boats might come in or out.
Yes.
And there's tables and there's lighting and such. And I think she's just trying to find a quiet place.
I thought that was wonderful. She's just sitting there, and he walks up to her. And he pretends to be a stranger.
It reminded me of the phone call scene from the first film, where they're allowed to say the things that they couldn't just say. They have this pretense they're able to put on it, right?
He pretends to be, he's just that stranger. He says, "Hey, how you doing?" He's just looking at him like, "What's wrong with you?" And he goes, and he finally starts telling this story about being a time traveler. And he's got this napkin, a little paper thing. There's nothing written on it.
No.
But he's a writer, right? He's a storyteller. And again, we're in Greece, where Homer was born, supposedly, right? The original storyteller, an oral storyteller, not a written, because remember, Homer and the Iliad were originally orally told, and I'm not sure who actually wrote these things down. Just a story to some strange man named Homer. Maybe it was a woman. Some people speculate it was a woman.
I mean, who knows?
Nobody knows. So he begins to orally tell the story about a space traveler who was traveled when Celine is 82 years old.
I think so.
Like that?
Yeah.
And telling her about this particular night. Oh, hello,
What's up, Damien? We were talking about you in good ways at the beginning of the show, but thank you for coming by, my man.
Damien's always a good.
Absolutely.
There's no other way to talk about Damien. And about a time traveler basically giving a message to the Celine from the future to the Celine of right now.
Right.
Of how things are going to work out. Everything is going to be fine, including have a great, intimate, and passionate moment in love tonight. And she at first she's still that bite, and she even tells him, cut this out. This is rather serious. But the thing is about him, he persists nevertheless.
Right.
And that's true love. He's not going to let all these things, he knows her very well. Like he told her before, I know all about you. I think you're crazy. I think all these things. And I won't want to change you. And you stop wanting to change me. And that's the thing is, I loved you because this is how you are. And you love me. I think
because, and they know that because they've spent the time. We've watched them across now 6-something hours truly communicate their deepest thoughts, their deepest interests, their deepest, even their neuroses and their casual errors in life, and all of these things. We've watched them know one another to such an extent that they don't need to give these movies the happy ending. They give them the ending that fits us as the viewer because we know them well enough to manage that. It's beautifully mastered. I want to say, hey, what's up, Eric? How you doing? Sorry. Yes. Firstly, I don't talk about movies casually. I tend to get pretty deep on these shows. But when you put Gore and I together, we knew that, we couldn't talk about.
I don't think you can discuss these particular movies any other way, John.
Truthfully, but I think
they're very intimate films.
We were originally thinking, let's just talk about all of Linklater's movies, but I think both kind of realized we would need 10 hours to get through all of these things because there's so much to unpack. Even with these 3 movies, we're, I think, still scratching some of the surface.
No, I do agree. I mean, in the sense that because we haven't touched upon one other part about this is how he got the idea for these films.
Oh, I don't know that I know this.
The way he got this idea to these films is that after Slacker became a hit, well, not a hit, but it became a
cult hit,
right? A cult hit, so to speak. He said Linklater had a sister that lived in Philadelphia, and he went to see her, and they had a film premiere there of Slacker. Afterwards, with his sister, they went to some little toy shop. And at this toy shop, there was this woman behind the counter. And Linklater said that they began to talk. And they kept talking. And as he's leaving with his sister, he goes back. And he says, I would like to talk to you again. I'm here for about a week or so, and maybe I can see you, maybe after work. And she says, yeah, I get off at 9:30. And so he meets her at 9:30. And he said that they went for a walk through Philly. And he told her who he was. He had making a movie called Slacker. And he goes, we talked all night. And he left, came back. They exchanged some information. But he never heard from her again. Dazed and Confused came out. And then when he made this film, he went to Philadelphia. They had premieres in Philadelphia. And he kept hoping, Linklater said, that she would show up at one of these
No
premieres.
way. Wow.
He kept thinking that she would show up. And she didn't.
Huh.
And then he receives a letter around this time. It was from someone who worked at the toy shop with this woman. Her name was Amy. The woman's name was Amy. And she said that, are you so-and-so that made this movie back then and Slacker and such? Are you so-and-so? And because my friend Amy, she talked about you a lot about that night. Talked about you a lot that night. And I just wanted to let you know that Amy died.
Oof.
And
Wow.
and she died in 1994.
Oof.
And she was riding on a motorcycle, and she was, I think, sitting on the backside, on the back of someone's motorcycle. There was an accident, and she was killed.
Wow.
And Linklater said that in '94 is when he was making Before Sunrise.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's why he had never heard from her. That's why she wasn't at the premiere of this film. So he said when after he had met her, he knew he had a film in mind. And even though he said he felt a little bit guilty after meeting this woman for this one night, he felt guilty that he already was making it into a story.
Huh.
I think artists do this, right?
Right.
But he felt guilty though that he was wanting to convert this moment into a film one day.
Share like cheapen it by sharing it somehow.
Yeah, exactly. I think.
Wow.
And then when he made it, and then he learned the truth, and the third film, John, at the end credits, the film's dedicated to her.
Wow.
You go down towards the end of the film, and it's dedicated to Amy. I forget her last name. Yeah.
I mean, it. Wow.
It was devastating when I read that.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting because the films clearly now, in some way, romanticize and give the happy ending that he wasn't unable to get, the resolution, but coincidentally, ironically, don't give viewers endings. And there's a wonderful symbiosis there. It's like, I'm not going to give the audience the resolution. I'm going to allow them to choose their resolution, but I'm going to give myself the resolution I wanted, right? Like I'm going to work through some of that grief a little bit. Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yes, I think, and if you notice, John, in the that young couple,
Yeah.
the young couple in there in Greece.
Yeah. At the lunch table or whatever.
If I remember correctly, the young man rode a motorcycle.
She mentions it. Yes.
And
yeah, the girl mentions it.
Yep. And I think in his film, Amy's alive. That's the way I see it.
I mean,
the woman who inspired these three films,
right,
is alive.
Of course.
In his story.
Wow.
And I thought that was just absolutely beautiful.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, absolutely amazing.
Then when he dedicates the film to her, yeah, at the end, yeah.
I'm telling you, the second we're done, I'm going to go tell my wife that story. Holy cow. Holy cow. Those were the big things I wanted to talk about, but I love your wall behind you so much. I kind of want to spend a little time on connective tissue, just movies. I do the show with, and I'm planning one for next Saturday for those that want the vibe. the vibe check with my man Comic Shop News Dan,
Oh,
where
damn.
we start with a movie that we both really care about, and then try to find films that share connective tissue in some way with that film. So we've talked a lot about these 3 Linklater films, and it was perfect when you logged in and I looked behind you at those movies, because the first one that I could see, even though like maybe people on their screens on their phones can't see clearly, the first one I saw was the Wong Kar-wai classic, in my opinion, In the Mood for Love.
Yeah.
And Wong Kar-wai, the amazing filmmaker, who for me this is his masterpiece, but just such a great filmmaker. It was if I were to pick a movie that vibed with these 3 movies, it would be that one.
That's why I have it up here.
We're
synchronicity, John.
I mean, I
think me, John, because you know this film better than I do. And the thing is, for those of you watching, I think this is I think one, we both think it's a masterpiece, but also this is a very beautiful film to me. But I think if anybody cares for it more, it's probably John. John, just tell me whatever you just go.
So yeah, Wong Kar-wai. This is his movie In the Mood for Love, and it focuses on a man and a woman it's Hong Kong, right?
Yeah, it's Hong Kong,
and they're living in the same building, and is it the 50s?
I don't know, the 50s or the 60s.
The culture I think was probably looks like our 50s, but it probably happened there in their 60s. And the idea is that their spouses are having an affair with each other, that the man's wife and the woman's husband are having an affair. And when they both find out, at first they decide that they want some measure of revenge, and they would get it by having an affair themselves. But very quickly, this relationship between the two of them evolves to an extent where the artifice of revenge is the illusion, and the reality is the connection made through their grief together. And it spans a considerable time as you look at this relationship across many, many years. But it is in the same way these 3 films used conversation and the mundane of life to illuminate the importance of what's real. You get to see them evolve this relationship, and what is, and again, no hard and fast happy ending or clear ending. It's more still some of the same left to your sensibility of these characters to decide what's real and what happens. But and as he was showing you there's actually a trilogy of films that you can kind of piece together. Chungking Express and 2046 is the third one, right?
Yes, is the third one.
If you want to try to piece together that trilogy, Wong Kar-wai kind of has a trilogy, the filmmaker. For me, as much as I like Chungking Express and 2046, it's all about the middle. But I guess it's funny. I guess I like Before Sunset the best of the 3 of these films too. Maybe there's something about the unfinished middle chapter that I like the most. I don't know.
No, the thing is about the In the Mood for Love and 2046, and the sense that the 2046 is a sequel to this, or somewhat is. Same character, same situation where 2 people are in love with each other, and the question is, are they going to cross the threshold?
Yeah.
And the thing about this writer, is when I first saw his films, this one, and with Chungking Express, Fallen Angels, and such, but particularly this one, is that when you watch it, we have certain idea what an Asian filmmaker does. And when we think of Asian films, we don't think romance.
No.
For romance, we think of Hollywood in the golden age, 30s and the 40s. We think of the Europeans, particularly the Italians and the French.
Which is funny because it's kind of the stuff that Linklater's deconstructing with his films is those norms, right?
That's right. That's right. And also the Mexicans and Latin American filmmakers are really good at romance.
Oh, yeah.
And in his film, when I first watched In the Mood for Love, and I started to hear, I think it's Nat King Cole singing in Spanish. There are many Spanish ballads in this film.
Yeah.
And the sound, the music that he uses, and the scenes that he uses, the moments, again, this is also like moments in time, like Linklater does, but he's much more masterful at it. And emotionally, I mean, you are taken emotionally on these films, and it's devastating in a way that, I mean, from someone like myself, and I can speak for John and others who like the movies, it's worth it emotionally, and you will feel emotion for this film.
Yeah,
it will, and because the thing is, it feels real, and that back to Linklater. These Linklater films, as conflicted as they are, they have a realistic resolution or happy ending. That's what I like about them. I think they're realistic.
Sure.
And this film is also realistic about how things maybe don't go the way you would want them to go. And so I linked these up together because I think when I saw these films, like I said, 2046 was around the same time this one came out. Before Sunset. It was already 2003, right, John? Wasn't it?
2046 was a little later. Yeah, yeah, somewhere in there.
Around that time, but this is 2000, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, but the thing is, they all do have to do with what love is, the essence of love. And this is also, I mean, it is true. The potential of love.
And even Chungking Express, which was the first Wong Kar film that I saw, it's a split narrative, and there's lots of things going on, and you might consider it the I don't know, the lock, stock, and two smoking barrels of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But my favorite portion was the love story portion in there, which feels like the precursor to In the Mood for Love in a lot of ways.
That's the one about the girl who works at the little restaurant.
Yeah.
And she loves that song California Dreaming.
Yep. Hello, Greg. Good to see you, Greg. Thanks for coming by, man.
I mean, he's absolutely, yeah. Hello, Craig. This man is absolutely just brilliant. And my understanding of him, you know more about him than I do, John, is that he had lived in Shanghai. Then he went to Hong Kong, and they didn't speak Cantonese. His mom was a big film buff, and they would go to the movies all the time. And they would watch whatever was on. And it got the idea for him in filmmaking. And his mom loved music. And I think that's where some of these Spanish language ballads came into the effect.
Okay.
And the way he incorporates them. And again, so when you watch his film, you're thinking, this is an Asian filmmaker that made this?
Right. He has
probably the most in the 20th century. I mean, I want to say, John, I'm going to go out here with this.
Do it.
And I think he's probably the best filmmaker of romance that I've seen, certainly the last 25 years, of any of the Americans, the Europeans, the Latin Americans. What he does with this one film, I was going
to say, he hasn't done that many movies either, but he's totally earned what you're saying.
This one just gets it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just from beginning to the end, it's just a beautiful experience. Oh, and the ending. I'm not going to say the ending. How this ends.
Yeah.
Is just wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I think more so than Linklater, and nothing to take anything away from what Linklater's doing, but they both have a very different approach to these topics and to these themes. And Linklater wants to let his characters breathe. And I think he does that through speech. Wong Kar-wai wants to capture mood through editing and cinematography and music, and he truly utilizes all aspects of the cinema media
Brilliant.
to try
Absolutely.
to weave something that feels like language, the language of cinema. But Linklater wants to use actual language, and I think so. There's a literal versus figurative kind of disparity between the two, but they're both attempting to reach the same place in the end, right?
Thinking about the film, maybe the link some in a way is that when when Jesse asked Celine on the train, "Do you want to come with me?"
Yeah.
And she agrees to go with him. You take that risk, right?
Right.
And then 9, 10 years pass, they meet again. And is he bitter? Is she bitter why they didn't meet again? I mean, her circumstances, she couldn't be there. Is he angry at her, not knowing why she couldn't be there? But it works out. Then they're now, married and they have kids. Well, not married, but they have kids, and they're together, but they have some issues. Was it worth it? And of course, the answer is yes. I mean, in these films, it's worth it, right? Now, in this situation, those of you who have not seen the film, the characters make a decision, right? And they have to live with it. Basically, the aftertaste of love. They both are in love with each other, but as like John said, they want to do the right thing, even though they want to do the wrong thing. And especially from her end, they want to do the right thing. And if you don't mind, John, what I thought about when I was watching all these, remember The Age of Innocence?
Of course, yeah.
And you remember how it ended, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in the narration in the film by Scorsese, he had Joanne Woodward. It was Joanne Woodward who did the voiceover.
Oh, was it? Okay, I remembered that.
Because she also did the audiobook. I remember that because I don't listen to audiobooks but very much, but I had that on cassette tape, and at that point I was traveling from Austin to South Texas back then, and I had that tape in my car. I liked Joanne Woodward, and I liked the novel, and I read it, and so I liked the film and the novel. But let's see, and this is from Wharton's The Age of Innocence, right?
Look, he's got it like right there in front of him. I love it.
And so, do you remember at the end of the novel? I guess for this, you've seen the film, right? You see Archer is played by Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
Michelle Pfeiffer is the Countess Elena Olenska. He's married to Mary Welland, who is played by Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
And this takes place after he has him and Elena Olenska, the love of his life, are not together. And they met when he was engaged to her. Was it her cousin? They were cousins?
I think so. Yeah.
And so in the end, it's Ellen who decides not to, I guess, break up this relationship.
Right.
And not him. So decades have passed. His wife has died. His son has grown. And so when I think of these films, this one and that one, I think of this line. This is Archer. And he says, something he knew he had missed, the flower of life. But he thought of it now as a thing so unattainable and improbable that to have repined would have been like despairing because one had not drawn the first prize in a lottery. There were 100 million tickets in his lottery, and there was only one prize. The chances had been too decidedly against him. When he thought of Ellen Olenska, it was abstractly, as one might think of some imaginary beloved in the book or picture. She had become the composite vision of all that he had missed.
Wow.
You know, and before sunrise, when they two separated, it's possible they thought the same. If they had not re-met and they
Right.
would have gone on with their lives, they would have been like Archer. And
If
when
she had read his book and felt like he clearly didn't know me at all,
that's right.
and chose not to show up because he's married now and happy, and chose
That's
not to
right.
show up,
That's right.
they would have had similar experience, right?
The experiences and also the characters here.
Yeah.
This is actually more closer to them.
Right.
You know, the flower of my life. I feel
And
like
you're
I
talking about the time and place that accompany together to make the culture of these characters and their stories, right? The expectations on a woman in 1960s Hong Kong versus a French woman in 1990s, Paris, versus a woman in whatever it was, century England. Like, I think you're looking at culture impacting the choices that these characters are making, and the ways in which they're navigating the same waters but finding different endpoints, right?
But it goes to bat, I mean, in the sense of, yeah, this one was The Age of Innocence, I think, was the 1870s, 1880s
Okay.
in New York.
Okay.
Like, you had all this convention
Yeah.
and all these customs. You want to breach them.
Yeah.
Here in The Mood for Love, it would have been a scandal for them,
Right.
even though their lovers were guilty. But
Right.
these people have a conscience. They want to do the right thing. The Countess Ellen Olenska in The Age of Innocence wanted to do the right thing by her cousin and by her family. She does love Archer. Archer loves her. And we don't know how she thinks from the novel, but we know how he thinks.
Right.
And in here, Ethan decides to leave his wife, right?
They face that same choice in that middle chapter, right?
Mm-hmm. They do.
Yeah.
And he decides to stay in Paris with this woman, leave his wife, then write a novel that likely his wife has read or heard about. And he describes all these moments of passion, and to be that woman, to be that person. You married me, but all this time you were thinking of somebody else when you probably made love to me. And or
I was a consolation prize, right? I was the second choice.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And now I've wasted my years on you.
I mean, because she's an alcoholic, according to this in the story,
right?
And she's really bitter and angry.
We're talking about in Before Midnight, when we're seeing the fallout of the choice at the end of Before Sunset.
And the son is kind of caught in the middle, but the son seems okay, given the situation. But like the son tells him, "Oh yeah, remember John? Yeah, in the beginning of this one, the third one is
when they're dropping him off at the airport.
He goes, "I'm going to come and see you," and the son tells her, "Dad, I'd rather you didn't."
Yeah.
He goes, "What is it? It makes Mom unhappy."
Yeah. It's too hard for her still.
It's too hard.
9 years later, she's still dealing with that.
But this is the son, he's a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
But thinking about his mom. He loves his mom. He loves his dad, but he knows these two together, it's going to hurt Mom.
Right.
And this is just the reality of how things are by his decision to be with Celine.
Totally.
Yeah. And so again, back to the idealization of love. I mean, you can speak better than I can, and maybe some and others, in the sense that you've been through this, John, and it's worked out. But I think in the sense that if you go into these things with feathers and clouds and silver linings and all these type of things in it, well, then don't be surprised if you're disappointed or end up really bitter and hurtful towards others or towards yourself.
Well, I mean, to your earlier point, I think as lovely as it is to have the idyllic dream, the dream's end, and reality has to set in eventually. But you of course need the dream. The dream is not frivolous and unnecessary. It's actually vital to create a foundation to build from. But it can't be all there is. It can't be it, because the dream is transitory. And so as a result, I think what you end up with is a hope that both parties can, to your analogy of the apple, can let that seed be something that entwines them both, right? That's the tricky part. And I think that's what these films, again, Age of Innocence, Wong Kar-wai's trilogy, the Before trilogy, I think they're all trying to navigate the discussion around evolution of love in different eras and different locales.
Well, everything's gonna be like Casablanca. I have Casablanca up here for a reason.
You would love this. I just saw Casablanca again. And a local theater near me does flashback Wednesday screenings. And for my mom, we gifted her, my brothers and I gifted her dinner and a movie date with all three of us for Christmas. And my older brother got sick. And so I brought Charlie in lieu of him. And my younger brother brought his son. And we all took mom out to see Casablanca, and it was one of the best movie experiences of my life because I'd never seen it in a theater like that. And my mom reliving it, seeing it, because she was basically born the same year probably that came out in the 40s, and my nephew who had never seen it, and Charlie who had only seen it once at home with us. And it was phenomenal. It was one of the best movie going experiences I've ever had.
Wow. Yeah, I first saw it in the theater. I mean, I had avoided seeing it on TV when I was younger, but when it premiered, one of the theaters showed it, and that's when I said, I want to see it now.
Sure.
And yes, to experience it on the screen,
Ooh.
It's quite beautiful.
Yeah.
And regarding Bergman, and the thing is about that ending, the ending to this film, it always made me uncomfortable, John, because Bogart, when he sees Bergman walk into the cafe,
right,
he's quite affected by it. He's actually devastated by it. He starts drinking.
Yep.
And he's just completely touched to remember when they knew each other in Paris. And then when he's on the train, back to Linklater, and she doesn't show up.
Yeah.
She doesn't show up on the train.
Nope.
Now, here, Ethan Hawke's character, he doesn't seem like he's bitter about it. But here, without knowing why she couldn't show up,
right,
he's bitter.
Yeah.
Right? He's a bitter man. Now, when she shows up and tells him the truth, she's there with her husband, who's actually was alive, and she heard about he was hurt, went back to help him.
Much like Celine's grandmother and not being able to show up at the train station in Vienna,
right? That's right. And so they are, there they are. And so, but he's still in love with her. She's still in love with him. And they have this idea we still have Paris, right? We still have Paris. But, memories, when you look back on them, but sometimes memories, when you look back on them, are, they cut like a knife.
Absolutely.
And so what made me uncomfortable about this film is when she says, I want to go with you there at the plane, and Laszlo's on the plane, and he tells her, no, you'll regret it if you don't go, and blah, 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 blah. I always think, that was a test. Failed the test. She was supposed to say, Laszlo doesn't need me. You need me. He's going to go out there and do a speech about the rise of fascism and all this. I'm going with you, Rick. She failed the test. So at the end, he's there with Rich, it's a wonderful relationship, that sort of thing, and it ends.
Funny.
And so, I mean, I like the film a lot, but that.
But I think it's always been a litmus test for romanticism, right? Because you look at even in When Harry Met Sally,
I like that.
and
right.
throughout When Harry Met Sally, they're debating and switching sides about who should she end up with. And the implication that it's Rick's choice or Laszlo's choice, I think, is ridiculous, because it's clearly her choice, and she could stay. She could make that choice. She chooses, and whether it's because of what he does or whether it's because of what's in her heart, right? She makes the choice because it's hers to be made. Que paso? Good to see you, Angel. I hope you're doing well, man. Because that's the beauty of that sequence, and I think the beauty of that, it still boggles my mind that movie was such a constant rewrite, because it seems flawlessly organized.
Yeah, the making of it was a mess.
The journey of that movie. When the screening we went to, a gentleman who has been, I mean, since I was a kid going to see screenings, this guy has been working for the cinemas in my area. And he used to work at the biggest screen in the Western United States that we have out near here. And every opening night, he would be down in front shouting to the audience, "Welcome to the biggest screen in the Western United States." And he would run up the aisle and he would introduce every single screening that weekend. Now he's working at this other theater and he introduces all the Throwback Wednesday shows. And I thought he was dead, and he's there, and he's up front, and he's doing the thing like I was a kid. It was like what's the phrase in that they say in Field of Dreams? It was like I was dipped in magic waters, right? It was like you were instantly a kid again. And he's up there, and he's got this novel all about the making of Casablanca, and he's giving it away to somebody in the chat in the audience, and he's like, give it back to me next time you come to one of these screenings. And the journey of that film is just, it's remarkable. That it ended up being even half as good as it is would have been a remarkable thing. But the fact that it ends up to be seemingly flawless, like it's just shocking.
It does seem to be flawless. It's like it's one of my favorite movies.
A masterclass for sure.
It is, to have it up there. I had Notorious up here, but I didn't have it up here because I like Notorious a lot.
Another great Bergman film.
Film. And actually, did you ever see this show in the late 80s called The Days and Nights of Molly Dodd?
No, but it sounds familiar. The name.
It aired on ABC. It was starred Blair Brown.
Okay.
And the actor Strathern, what's his name?
Strother Martin.
Peter. He was in the Jason Bourne films. He was one of the CIA guys. Not
David Strathairn.
Bingo.
Yeah.
I never say his name. He was in this series with her.
Okay.
And there's a Bergman and also a love connection, because I was thinking about when I was watching these, and it was one of my favorite series of the late 80s. I used to watch it. It on ABC. It was a 30-minute. It was a comedy, but it didn't have the laugh track.
Nice.
And Blair Brown was she had left her office job to work at a bookstore. And it's one of those bookstores that you see in the Woody Allen films, right? Chaotic bookstores, just, used bookstores that have all these first editions and all these sort of thing, right? And Strathern is the bookseller. And he comes from an upper class family. His father, who's this rich guy, has just bought him the bookstore because his son is very neurotic. He wears these glasses. He's very shy, very awkward. And but he's a wealthy guy. But he runs this bookstore but has no idea what he's doing. So Blair Brown, she applies for the job because she wants to be a writer. She's a poet, and she's an aspiring poet. So anyway, the story is them, her trying to live in New York in the late 80s, and all the little quirky people that appear in the series, and Squid and Strathern. But there was one episode when something happens between Molly and him where they make love. And the next day when she goes to the bookshop, he's still treating her as, he's an awkward guy, but he can talk to her. He does all these. And she can understand this. It's almost like it never happened. Finally, she just confronts him and says, "We need to talk." And he's got all these books with him. He's reading. Because what are you reading? I'm reading, I think, the Peloponnesian War. Back to Peloponnesian. Which is in Greek. Because do you know Greek? No, I don't know Greek, but I like the letters. They're really fascinating. I think it's quite. And she says, he goes, "We need to talk." She goes, "About what happened the other night." He goes, "Yeah, what? I mean, we made love." He just had no response from him. "Oh, I need to get some bagels." And she says, "Was it that bad? I mean, was I really that bad with you?" And he says, "I saw Ingrid Bergman naked." Blair Brown just looks at him. He says, my father's third wife, she was from Stockholm. And when I was a kid, we would go see her. And she was really good friends with Ingrid Bergman. And one day, and Ingrid Bergman would come every summer, and she would lay out on the lawn, and she would be in this porcelain tub, and she would take these baths. She would sponge her bath over and over and over. And she would rise up from it and then lay a blanket on the lawn, completely naked. And then she would lie on it and put lotion all over her thighs, her stomach, her breasts. And I wasn't spying on her. She was 9 years old. Because I wasn't spying on her because she looked at me. She saw me looking at her. And she smiled at me. She had the most beautiful eyes, beautiful teeth. And she just looked at me. And I was 9 years old. And at the time, I never thought I would never experience or see something so marvelous in my life. And over the years, I thought the same. Until you.
Wow, good line.
And and Blair Brown just looks at him. And then he says, I need to go get some bagels. And he leaves to go get some bagels.
Well played.
It's a well played, and that's just it, And what a great compliment. After,
right?
He sees her, she goes, was I bad? Was it that bad with me?
Yeah, right? And then he launches into this.
Boom.
Wow.
Boom. Really. It's a great series. It's never been collected on DVD. It's that little. I think the reason it's never been collected on DVD because there's music in it. And it has to do with all the legal issues.
That all throws so many shows off. Those legal rights for the music.
But I remember that, and now it's on YouTube because over the years I've been searching for them, trying to find them on YouTube. And I always liked that episode. I saw it back in the same year of Slacker. It would have been 88, 89.
Wow.
Yeah. So love, I'm telling you, love with the essence of it. Right?
Well, the ideal versus the reality, right? Which I think is a big piece in all of this. Thank you for doing this tonight. I know it's almost midnight your time.
I don't know how long. Is it almost midnight?
It's 11:30. It's about 11:30.
I didn't know that. I did not notice the time.
We will definitely do this again.
I would like to very much. Absolutely.
We've just scratched the surface of our joy for movies, and we'll find another topic again soon. Absolutely. And as a reminder, Dan and I, we're going to be doing a vibe check next Saturday night. I believe it'll be on his channel. I think it's due on his channel next.
What are the movies, Sean?
He is proposing we do Blade Runner as our centerpiece, and then each of us will bring a movie that hopefully has the same vibe as Blade Runner, which is a tricky one. That
could be any one of these, because that one, I mean, the idea of actually, John, remember the movie? Remember this book here, The Invention of Morel?
Yes.
Maybe I recommend maybe checking it out before you see Blade Runner.
Yeah,
I think
before I rewatch it.
Maybe before you before you discuss it with Dan. I think I discussed it with you before that someone on Lost on the set was reading this book.
Yes.
And this is a beautiful novella. It was made into last year in Marienbad.
Okay.
And let me rephrase that. Last year in Marienbad by Alan Rene was. This is not an adaptation. It was inspired by this, but the film is very different.
Okay.
And but here again, this actually has to do with the idealization of love and what love is, and if you incorporate film into it. And one thing I didn't discuss Cinema Paradiso.
Great movie, yeah.
And we know how that. Of course, there's two endings to that film, as you probably know: the director's cut and the original. But regarding Blade Runner, you have to go. But regarding Blade Runner is this idea of you have all these memories,
Mm.
and then when you realize the memories are implanted, in case of like Rachel, but the thing is they feel real though.
Right. That doesn't make them any less important.
Exactly, that's important, and you feel love, you feel desire, you feel pain, you feel jealousy, you feel all the things that humans feel, and then the realization that, well, this is all implanted. I'm not a human being. And then regarding the Blade Runner, Harrison Ford,
yeah, Deckard.
You know, if when he begins to doubt, you know, am I human or not human? And does it matter? And then when these two characters, if they're both androids, well, she is, but if he is,
right,
when they're more human than the humans, and the idea of basically the stuff we've been talking about here,
right,
yeah. So anyway, I don't want to go into this, but it's fascinating discussing this with Dan.
Yeah, no, I think it's a film that has endless options and endless discussion topic points, because I think it's much like Casablanca. I think it's a movie that has had so many debates around the ending, around the structure of it, around the iterations of it, the possibilities of it, of course the novella that's based on, and so I think it's gonna go for some, as always with Dan and I, some very interesting directions for sure.
Do androids dream
of electric sheep? Yeah.
I mean, I dream of Julie Delpy, maybe.
Hey, that would be a very wonderful dream, I think.
Thank you for having me, John.
This has been a dream. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very
much. Huge appreciation. And the link to his channel is right down below, because Gore makes videos centering around reading and books, and lots of great discussions going on over there as well. We will be back again soon at some point when we choose our next topic. We'll debate it and get back to you all again here soon. Thank you we got Damien and Robert and Borinkin and Perry, all of you in the chat who've been hanging out with us. Greg came for a little bit. So thank you all for coming and chilling with us tonight. And hopefully we'll catch you all again here soon. Have a good night. Yeah. Bye. Oops, sorry, click that button and then it's bye.